It has been 11 days now since Susan disappeared.
And there is one person's story you have not heard yet. The last person to have spent time with Susan and Josh on the night she vanished. ABC4's Christiana Brady's live in the Breaking News Center tonight with her story.
News right now. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Tracy Carlos. A massive explosion at a Washington State home of Josh Powell. He's the husband under investigation in connection with his missing Utah wife. Now, this happened just a little while ago. You were looking at the scene in Graham, Washington right now. The
jury has decided the state was negligent when it was supposed to protect two young boys involved in a case that got national attention. The state will now have to pay Chuck and Judy Cox, those are the grandparents of the two boys, approximately $100 million.
February 5th, 2012, 12:05 in the afternoon, Graham, Washington. A gray Toyota Prius pulls into the driveway of a rented house on 189th Street, Court East. It's a cold Sunday afternoon in Pierce County, the kind of day most families spend indoors, watching television, sharing a meal, doing nothing special. In the back seat of that Prius are two little boys, Charlie Powell, 7 years old, Braden Powell, 5. They've been living with their grandparents for the past 5 months, ever since their grandfather was arrested for crimes so disturbing that a judge immediately removed both children from the home. Today is a supervised visit with their father. A social worker named Elizabeth Griffin Hall is driving. She's been bringing the boys here every week for 3 months now. Court-ordered, supervised, routine. The boys climb out of the car and run toward the front door. They love their dad. One of them recently told his grandmother that all he wanted was to go home and live with his daddy. Their father, Josh Powell, opens the door. He looks at the boys and says something that will haunt Elizabeth Griffin Hall for the rest of her life. "I have a big surprise for you." The boys rush inside. Elizabeth is one step behind them. But before she can cross the threshold, Josh Powell looks directly at her. His shoulders are slumped. His face carries what she would later describe as a sheepish look. And then he shrugs his shoulders and slams the door in her face. She knocks. She rings the doorbell. She calls out. He doesn't open the door. She keeps knocking, thinking it must be a mistake. Nothing like this has ever happened during a supervised visit before. Then she hears one of the boys crying inside the house. Then she smells gasoline. Elizabeth Griffin Hall runs to her car, locks the doors, and dials 911 with shaking hands. What follows is one of the most agonizing emergency calls ever recorded in American criminal history. She tells the dispatcher that a court-ordered supervised visit has gone wrong, that the father has grabbed the children and locked her out, that she can smell gas, that she is afraid for their lives. The dispatcher asks her for the address. She doesn't know the exact number. He asks for the father's date of birth. She doesn't have it. How do you spell his last name? 2 L's? What race is he? She grows more desperate. She tells the dispatcher she needs help right away. He tells her that officers respond to life-threatening situations first. She says this could be life-threatening. He says he understands and deputies will be dispatched. She waits. 7 agonizing minutes. Nobody comes. Then the house explodes. The blast is so powerful that neighbors blocks away hear it. Windows shatter, walls collapse inward. Within seconds, the entire structure is fully engulfed in flames so intense that firefighters arriving on scene can't get within 30 feet of the building. Elizabeth Griffin Hall's second call to 911 is almost impossible to listen to. Her voice breaks apart as she screams into the phone. "He exploded the house. He exploded the house. People are saying there's not somebody here, but I was just there. And there is somebody here. There's 2 little boys in the house, and they're 5 and 7, and there's an adult man, and he has supervised visitation, and he blew up the house and the kids. Charlie and Braden Powell died that afternoon. The medical examiner would later determine that their father had attacked both of them with a hatchet before dousing the house in gasoline and igniting it. The boys were struck before the fire. They were conscious when their father hurt them. They knew what was happening. Josh Powell died with them. He was 36 years old. His sons were 7 and 5. But this story does not begin on February 5th, 2012. It begins more than 2 years earlier on a freezing December night in the Utah desert when a young mother named Susan Powell vanished from her home. And the only person who could explain what happened told a story that didn't make any sense at all. What you're about to hear is the true account of a woman who predicted her own murder, a husband whose lies fooled no one but couldn't be proven, 2 little boys who tried to tell the truth in the only way children know how, and a system that failed every single one of them. This case involves domestic violence, the murder of children, and institutional failures that resulted in preventable deaths. Some of the details you're about to hear are deeply disturbing. Viewer discretion is once again strongly advised. Tonight's case will shake you to your core. Take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and please let us know where you're watching from. And now we begin. To understand the magnitude of what was lost, you need to know who Susan Cox Powell really was. Not the missing woman on the flyer, not the name on a police report, not the cold case. The real person, because she deserved so much more than the life she was given and the death she was handed. Susan Marie Cox was born on October 16th, 1981, and grew up in Puyallup, Washington, a quiet community in Pierce County about 35 miles south of Seattle. She was the kind of person that people gravitate toward without quite understanding why. Warm, genuine. The type who remembered your birthday when everyone else forgot, who showed up when it mattered, who could walk into a room full of strangers and make everyone feel like they'd known her for years. Her family described her as artistic, creative, someone who saw beauty in ordinary things. She graduated from high school with honors. She was deeply committed to her faith in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She had dreams, real ones, not vague ideas about the future, but concrete plans for the life she wanted to build. Susan met Joshua Powell through their Church Institute class, and the two reconnected at a dinner gathering at his apartment in Tacoma in November of 2000. She was 19. He was charming enough, attentive in the beginning, the way predators often are when they're still wearing the mask. They married in the Portland, Oregon temple in April of 2001. From the very beginning, something was deeply wrong with the Powell family. After the wedding, Susan and Josh moved in with Josh's father, Stephen Powell, in South Hill, Washington. What happened in that house should have been a warning to everyone. Stephen developed a fixation on Susan that went far beyond inappropriate. He secretly filmed her. He spied on her while she used the bathroom using a mirror propped at an angle. He stole her underwear from the laundry. He read her private journals. He wrote love songs about her and posted them online under a fake name, like some kind of deranged stalker pining for his own daughter-in-law. In 2003, Stephen Powell confessed his feelings to Susan directly. The exchange was accidentally captured on his own camcorder microphone. Susan rejected him. She was horrified, and she convinced Josh to leave Washington and put distance between them and Stephen. They moved to Utah, started over, or tried to. The couple settled in West Valley City, a suburb of Salt Lake City. Susan found work as a broker at Wells Fargo Investments. She was good at her job, organized, professional, the kind of employee that bosses wished they could clone. And then the children came. Charles Joshua Powell was born on January 19th, 2005. Braden Timothy Powell was born on January 2nd, 2007. Everything Susan did revolved around those two boys. Friends described her as the kind of mother who planned activities weeks in advance, who read to her sons every single night, who structured her entire life around making sure Charlie and Braden felt safe and loved and valued. She was the center of their world, and they were the center of hers. But behind the doors of their home on Sarah Circle, in West Valley City, Josh Powell was a completely different person from the one the neighbors saw mowing his lawn on Saturday mornings. Susan's private journals and emails, discovered by investigators after her disappearance, described a marriage that had curdled into something unrecognizable. Josh was controlling, financially reckless. He refused to attend church with the family, a decision that isolated Susan from the community she valued most. He maintained contact with his father, Stephen, despite everything Stephen had done. Despite the filming, the stalking, the confession. Josh kept that connection alive, and Susan was powerless to sever it. In 2007, Josh filed for bankruptcy, reporting more than $200,000 in debt. Money was disappearing into purchases Susan couldn't account for and expenses that didn't add up. She was the one working full-time at Wells Fargo. He was the one spending. By 2008, Susan Cox Powell knew she was in danger. She recorded video of property damage inside the house that she attributed to Josh. She documented bruises. She kept notes. And then she did something extraordinary, something that tells you everything you need to know about how clearly this woman saw her own future. Susan went to a bank and opened a safety deposit box. Inside it, she placed a handwritten document. It was part will, part insurance policy, part warning from beyond the grave. She described her marriage as being in extreme turmoil. She detailed Josh's behavior. She documented a $1 million life insurance policy that Josh had taken out on her. And then she wrote a single line that would become the most haunting sentence in the entire case. If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one. Let that sink in. A 28-year-old mother of two sitting alone in a bank, writing her own death prediction, sealing it in a box, and then going home to cook dinner for her children. Because what else could she do? Leave and go where? Take the boys and run. Josh would have come after them. She knew that. She knew him. She knew what he was capable of even before anyone else did. Susan Cox Powell saw the danger with terrifying clarity. She put it in writing. She sealed it in a vault. And then she walked back into the house with the man who would kill her because she refused to leave her sons alone with him. That is who Susan Powell was. That is what was taken. Sunday, December the 6th, 2009, West Valley City, Utah. It's a cold evening. A friend of the Powell family visited earlier that day and shared a meal of pancakes and eggs with Susan, Josh, and the boys. Josh cooked. The friend later told police that Susan seemed tired after eating and lay down for a nap. The friend left the house in the late afternoon. It was the last time anyone other than Josh Powell saw Susan alive. The next morning, Monday, December the 7th, everything unraveled. Susan didn't drop the boys off at daycare. She didn't show up at Wells Fargo. She didn't answer her phone. Nobody could reach her. Her employer called. Her friends called. Silence. Concerned relatives contacted police and asked them to check on the family. When officers arrived at the Powell home on Sarah Circle, it was empty. Lights on, door unlocked. No sign of forced entry, no sign of a struggle. But investigators noticed something immediately. A section of the living room carpet was damp, and 2 fans had been set up to dry the wet area. They found traces of blood on the floor. Hours later, Josh Powell returned home with Charlie and Braden. Charlie was 4. Braden was 2. Josh told police he had taken the boys on a late-night camping trip to Simpson Springs in the West Desert of Utah. He said they left around midnight in December in a snowstorm, with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. He said Susan stayed home because she was tired. He said he simply forgot it was a work and school day the next morning. Nobody believed him, not for a single second. Susan's friend, Kiersey Helliwell, would later say it in the plainest terms possible. Susan would have never allowed him to take the boys out in the winter to the desert in the middle of the night. Never. Not in a million years. The woman who planned her children's activities weeks in advance, who structured her entire life around their safety, just let her husband drive them into a blizzard at midnight. It defied everything anyone knew about Susan Powell. When police searched Josh's minivan, they found Susan's cell phone. The SIM card had been removed. They found shovels, tarps, gas canisters, a generator, the tools you would need if you were going to bury someone in the desert and needed light and fuel to do it. On December 8th, the day after police were first contacted, Josh rented a car and drove 800 miles before returning it to the Salt Lake City airport on December 10th. 800 miles. Nobody knows where he went. Nobody has ever established what he did during that drive. On December 9th, forensic testing confirmed it. The blood on the carpet belonged to Susan Powell. On December 15th, investigators opened her safety deposit box and found the letter. If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one. Josh Powell was named a person of interest. He was never arrested. He was never charged. The Salt Lake County District Attorney said that without a body, the case was too difficult to prosecute. They had circumstantial evidence. They had motive. They had blood. They had a van full of tools. They had a story that collapsed under the lightest scrutiny. But they didn't have Susan. Within weeks, Josh began systematically erasing her from existence. He liquidated Susan's retirement accounts. He canceled her chiropractic appointments. He withdrew the boys from daycare. Investigators later learned he had previously spoken to co-workers about how to hide a body in an abandoned mine shaft in the western Utah desert. By early January 2010, less than a month after his wife vanished, Josh packed up the house and moved with his sons back to Washington State, back to his father, Stephen, the same man who had stalked and secretly filmed Susan for years. Josh brought his motherless children into that house and told the media he was simply getting away from all the attention. As we go into the most chilling details of this documentary, take a brief moment to like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already for more in-depth investigations and analysis of significant cases like this. The investigation into Susan's disappearance dragged through 2010 and 2011 with agonizing slowness. Josh refused to cooperate. He publicly speculated that Susan had run away with another man, a Utah man named Stephen Cooker, who had gone missing around the same time. Police found zero evidence to support this theory. The lead investigator later confirmed that Cooker had been in Washington State when Susan disappeared and had absolutely no connection to her. Josh was throwing smoke, and everyone knew it. But while Josh stonewalled investigators, something else was happening. Something that would change everything. The boys started talking. Charlie, the older son, told investigators during an interview that the family went camping that night, just like his father said. But unlike Josh's version, Charlie said his mother came with them, and she didn't come back. Weeks after Susan's disappearance, a teacher at Charlie's school reported something devastating. The boy had told her flatly that his mother was dead. Months later, at daycare, 5-year-old Braden drew a picture. It showed a van with 3 people inside. When the daycare workers asked him about it, Braden said something that would haunt every single person who heard it. "Mommy was in the trunk." These weren't coach statements from prosecutors building a case. These weren't prompted by detectives looking for answers. These were a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old processing what they had witnessed on the night of December 6th, 2009, in the only way children know how: through drawings, through fragments, through things said to teachers and grandparents in quiet moments when their guard was down. Charlie and Braden Powell were the only living witnesses to whatever happened to their mother that night, and their father knew it. In September 2011, the case took a dramatic turn. Police raided Stephen Powell's home in Puyallup, Washington, on voyeurism charges. What they found was staggering even by the standards of this already nightmarish case. Stephen had been secretly photographing and filming young girls in his neighborhood, some as young as 8 years old, through their bathroom windows. Among the materials seized from his computers were dozens of indecent images of Susan herself, taken without her knowledge. Video recordings, journal entries dripping with obsession, love songs. Stephen Powell was arrested and charged with 14 counts of voyeurism and 1 count of possession of child pornography. Charlie and Braden had been living in that house, with that man, for nearly 2 years. After Stephen's arrest, a judge immediately removed the boys from Josh's custody and placed them with Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox. The boys moved to their grandparents' home. Chuck Cox would later describe how emotionally distant the children were when they first arrived. Closed off, guarded, the way children become when they've learned that the adults in their lives can't be trusted. But slowly, gradually, they began to open up. They started smiling again. They started talking about their mother. Chuck had hope, real hope, that as the boys grew older and felt safer, they might be able to articulate more clearly what they remembered from that December night. Josh fought the custody ruling with everything he had. He wanted his sons back. A court in Washington allowed him supervised visitation, while a psychologist named James Manley conducted evaluations. Manley assessed Josh and found adequate parenting skills and no criminal record. But he also documented serious concerns. Josh was defensive, paranoid, narcissistic. He displayed overbearing behavior with his sons and refused to acknowledge any personal shortcomings. Then, in January 2012, West Valley City Police discovered something on a computer seized from the Powell residence. Approximately 400 images, simulated child pornography, bestiality, incest. A Utah judge authorized police to share the material with Washington authorities overseeing the custody case. The images were alarming enough that a psychologist recommended Josh undergo an intensive psychosexual evaluation, including a polygraph, before he could regain any custody. But here's the part that will make your blood run cold. Those images were never shared with the Cox family's attorney before the custody hearing. Attorney Steve Downing said afterward that had he seen those images, he would have asked the court to change the terms of Josh's supervised visits. He would have demanded the visits happen in a public location, not at Josh's private home. He didn't learn he was allowed to see them until 4 days after Josh killed the boys. 4 days too late. On February 1st, 2012, a Washington judge ordered Josh to undergo the psychosexual evaluation and polygraph before any changes to custody could be considered. Josh had lost an appeal to get his children back just 4 days earlier. The walls were closing in. The boys were talking. The evaluation would expose everything. So Josh made a decision, the kind of decision that only a person with no conscience, no love, and no humanity left inside them could make. On the morning of February 5th, 2012, before the supervised visit, Josh sent a series of emails to his sister, Alina. Financial instructions, details about how to handle his affairs, how to manage things after he was gone. He left her a voicemail. His voice was flat, empty, already somewhere else. I am not able to live without my sons, and I am not able to go on anymore. He wasn't saying goodbye. He was announcing an execution. At approximately noon, Elizabeth Griffin Hall pulled into the driveway with Charlie and Braden. The boys ran to the door. They loved their father. They didn't know what he'd done to their mother. They didn't understand why they'd been taken away. All they knew was that this was their dad, and he said he had a big surprise for them. Elizabeth was one step behind them. Josh opened the door. The boys went in. Josh looked at Elizabeth, shrugged his shoulders, and slammed the door. She knocked. She rang the bell. She called out. She heard crying. She smelled gas. And then she called 911, and the system failed one final time. The dispatcher, David Lovrak, later admitted he recognized the name Josh Powell from the news, but didn't make the connection during the call. He asked routine booking questions while a woman screamed that children were in danger. He told her officers prioritize life-threatening situations. She told him this was life-threatening. He said someone would be dispatched. 7 minutes. The house exploded. The blast shattered windows, walls collapsed. Flames consumed everything inside within seconds. Elizabeth Griffin Hall stood in the driveway. The heat hit her face. She could not get to the boys. She would later tell ABC News that she wanted to break in. She would have broken in if she could have. But the door was locked, and then everything was fire. Josh Powell didn't just kill his sons that afternoon. He destroyed the last 2 people on Earth who might have eventually told the truth about what happened to their mother. Charlie, who had told his teacher his mother was dead. Braden, who had drawn a picture of Mommy in the trunk. The witnesses, the evidence, the voices. Gone. The aftermath unfolded in waves. Josh's brother, Michael Powell, suspected as a possible accomplice in Susan's disappearance, died by suicide in Minneapolis on February 11th, 2013. Police had questioned him repeatedly after finding his abandoned vehicle at an Oregon wrecking yard. He never explained why the car was there. Stephen Powell was convicted on voyeurism charges in May 2012. When authorities told him his son had murdered his grandchildren and killed himself, he showed almost no emotion. He was angry at the people telling him, not at what had happened. West Valley City Police closed their active investigation into Susan's disappearance on May 21st, 2013. They stated publicly that they believed Josh murdered Susan and that Michael helped conceal her body. Susan's remains have never been found. In 2012, Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services. They argued that the state had been negligent in allowing supervised visits at Josh's private home, despite overwhelming evidence that he was dangerous. In July 2020, a Pierce County jury agreed. The state of Washington was found negligent in the deaths of Charlie and Braden Powell. The jury awarded $98 million, $57 million per child, reduced by $8.4 million because of Josh Powell's direct responsibility for the murders. A judge later reduced the verdict. The Cox family appealed. They won. $98 million. That is what the state of Washington was ordered to pay for failing to protect two little boys whose father was a murder suspect, whose grandfather was a convicted voyeur, whose case file contained 400 images of depravity on the father's computer, and whose own words, "Mommy was in the trunk," should have been enough to keep them safe. It will never be enough. Susan's father, Chuck Cox, still holds a candlelight vigil for her every year at the angel statue dedicated to Susan at Woodbine Cemetery in Puyallup. Dozens of people attend, even now, all these years later. He describes his daughter the same way he always has. Loving, loyal, someone who wanted to be the best wife and mother she could be. Susan liked angels, he says. And the family considers Charlie and Braden their little angels, too. In 2020, Chuck Cox told a reporter something that captures the impossible weight of what this family has carried. "I don't know anything else I could have done, and they're still dead. My daughter's still missing, and now the children are dead. I had them safe. They were in my care. He had them safe. A grandfather who loved those boys, who watched them slowly come back to life, who saw them smile again and start talking again and begin healing. And then the court sent them back to the house on 189th Street for a supervised visit with the man who had already destroyed their mother. Every single person in this chain had a piece of the puzzle. The police in Utah, who named Josh a person of interest but couldn't bring charges without a body. The judge in Washington, who allowed supervised visits at a private residence. The psychologist who documented narcissism and paranoia, but still recommended contact. The authorities who found 400 images on Josh's computer and didn't share them with the family's attorney. The 911 dispatcher who treated a frantic social worker's report of gasoline and crying children as a routine call. Every one of them had a chance to change what happened. None of them took it. Susan Cox Powell deserved a life. A real one. Not the cage Josh built for her. Not the marriage that drained her dry. Not the letter she had to write in a bank vault because she already knew how her story would end. She deserved to watch her sons grow up. She deserved to be heard when she screamed for help in the only way she could, by hiding the truth inside a safety deposit box and hoping someone would find it before it was too late. Charlie and Braden Powell deserved a childhood. They deserved to be listened to when they drew pictures and told teachers what they saw. They deserved a system that heard a 5-year-old say Mommy was in the trunk and understood that those weren't just words. They were testimony. Instead, they were returned to the person everyone suspected had already taken everything from them. And on a Sunday afternoon in February, in a rented house in Washington State, the man who had silenced their mother silenced them too. Their names were Susan, Charlie, and Braden. They were a family, and they deserved so much more than this. If you like this coverage, join our community by subscribing and turning on notifications. Every subscriber makes it possible for us to keep creating content we're passionate about sharing with you.